Okay, welcome everybody to our second SWAG meeting. Is it recording?
It is.
Okay. To our second SWAG meeting of the year. Thank you very much for coming. We have a really busy agenda, so we're gonna just dive right in and start moving quickly. I think we'll start with just a brief round of introductions. My name's Andrea Miko. I'm a Portsmouth resident and co-chair of the SWAG.
Which team of Portsmouth resident?
Country Hillman, Portsmouth resident.
Dave Juice, State Representative.
Bill McQuillan, Fire Chief and Portsmouth Resident.
Public Information Officer.
Vince Lombardi, City Councilor.
Macy Caceres, Assistant Water Resource Manager for the city.
Brian Getz, Director of Water. Co-chair of the Safe Water Advisory Group. So thank you all for attending. We had one Laurel Shader can't make it, and Councilor Blaylock is hopefully able to attend here in a little bit. But as Andrea said, quite a few items to cover. I'll let Andrea start, and then we're going to work our way through. Well, we have 10 items with quite a few slides, but we'll try to go quickly. And, some of it for reference can circle back later as well.
Sounds good. Yeah. I want to recognize SWAG member Jim Hewitt also can't make it tonight. Let us know that. So approval of minutes. So I think I sent everybody minutes from the last meeting, the draft a week ago, and if we could just have a motion just to approve those minutes. If anyone has any, anyone can make a motion to do that. I will.
Second.
All right. Is everybody in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody opposed to that? Nope. Looks like we accept the minutes from the SWAG meeting in March. So thank you all for that. Next on the agenda is water supply and master plan update. So I'll pass that back to Brian.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. So the latest, greatest information for the first quarter, though we're a couple days away from the second quarter being over with. I can give you just some updated information. So precipitation wise, certainly we saw in March quite a bit of precipitation. It was dry again in April and May to some degree. We're sort of holding steady, slightly above normal. Our both the river flow data and the reservoir, which if there's any one slide I can use, I think I say this every time I pull this up. If there's any one slide, the reservoir slide tells you the best story of where we stand as far as any drought conditions or dryness. And you can see on the right, since the brief 2022 dry period, which was almost a drought, we've been on a wet or normal cycle. So that's good, and it's sort of held that way, and we're certainly nowhere near where we were 2016 or 2020. The groundwater levels up is good, so these trends are, we're going on about 14 years worth of information there on our well levels. So as you can see, some of them are near historic highs for that, and overall in very good shape. This is a new graph. It's kind of come about through our master planning update, also working with Al. On the left side, what it shows is essentially supply versus demand. So how much water do we have available? So on the left side of the Portsmouth water sources, which are the Madbury Water Treatment Facility, the Madbury wells, you can't quite see the lighter blue here on the screen, the Portsmouth well, the Collins well, the Greenland well. So basically combined, they could, if we turn them all on at a max day, we could do 7 million gallons of water. How much do we actually use in the first quarter? Just almost 3 million gallons. And then there's the breakdown of where that water came from. There's a separate table that has the detailed numbers, but safe to say on the Portsmouth system, a little less than, probably around 40%. So certainly, and we're into the high season, and right at the moment we're looking around 50% of supply versus capacity versus use. And then on the right side is the P system, so the 3 wells, the Haven, Harrison, and Smith. And they total, again, as far as capacity goes, close to 1.7 million gallons of water a day. And as you can see, about 500,000 gallons was the first quarter use. So that's very, and we're looking to actually update our website to be even monthly or even closer to real time so that people would know, where do we stand supply versus demand. I like to throw this graphic up because we are now, we believe, saving a considerable amount of money through the rebate program. 1,600 rebates issued, and our calculations are about 55,000 gallons a day, which is not nothing. It's about, I believe, about 1.5% reduction overall. But again, we've got great. The bigger number too is that we've had 1,600 rebates go out, so that means people have made the effort to do the upgrade. Number one, to apply for the rebate. And they're thinking about it, and hopefully in their water bills themselves they see the effect of that. The Little Main water transmission main project, and we are done with the first phase, and that ended today. We put new valves in on both sides of the bay, where the lines split and didn't have valves that operated, so that if we were to have a leak on either of the 2 pipes that go into the bay, we'd have a tough time shutting it off. But now we have valves on either side that we can shut off. And we also did the taps for the 3rd line. The intent is to bid that project at a later date right now, because we're going through permitting. That we're trying to come up with a new method of actually doing the work that needs wetlands approval, and that's going to take a little more time. But we are in a position now where we're not as nervous about it. And this is the installation on the Newington side of what those valves look like, and that's a worker down in there next to the one of the 20-inch pipes. So as you can see, the valves are not small, and the work took a considerable amount of work and effort and to get those valves in, but they all operate. We've already shut them down to test them, and the good news is when you shut one of them off, so that we're just pumping instead of through the 2 lines under the bay, flow and pressure hardly bumped. So we can still, through one pipe, get almost the same amount of water through. And that's really good news, because before, we would have to do almost a shutdown. So our intent is to, again, we're a little less nervous about this now, because again, like I said, if we get a leak on one of those 2 pipes now, we could shut it off, get out there, have time to fix it, and not be totally down with getting water from Madbury. So our plan is now continue with working with the engineers to revise the plans and permit submissions for future bid of that 3rd water line. We are also working on this Dover emergency interconnection, but unfortunately DOT bid the 3rd bridge between Dover and Newington, and once again they got too high a price for putting that in, so we don't at present know what they're going to do. So we'll stand by and wait to see whether that project can proceed. We do have $3.5 million earmarked from Senator Shaheen that doesn't really have a deadline on it, so that's kind of good. We may pursue, do we have another way of getting a pipe, under the bay, directional drill or whatever, but we're working on it. The Seacoast Emergency Interconnection Study is ongoing, so we're working with Underwood Engineers is working on collecting all that data. They have site visits coming up next week. I co-chair the committee that's managing this, and by the end of the year, we'll have an update that I'll be able to share with everybody here in this group. As far as master planning, we've finished all the inspections of our tank. We've updated the hydraulic model of the system, and we're starting work on that 2013 master plan update. And there were questions coming our way by Mr. Hewitt about, well, where do we stand regarding the last report, which was 2013, had 23 recommendations. So I went through and I'll go pretty quick, but this will be referenced for future on it. So that report, which was done and filed, there were 23 major recommendations out of it. I went through the list. We've completed 14 of them. 5 of them are currently in progress or in design. 1 of them we're not pursuing, and that was a recommendation to connect the Greenland to the Pease pressure zone. And as you could imagine, that was prior to PFAS issues, so we're not going there. And just 3 of them are pending future decisions, future CIP. And here's some snapshots of some of the projects. So this is the Pease tank. We did this in 2016. We replaced the tank on the right, 400,000 gallon tank with a brand new tank on the left. 600,000, the tank on the right's gone. And we have the new Pease tank out there. So that's done. This Osprey Landing tank, small little tank out at Osprey Landing that was actually had been out of service for a number of years, but was still just sitting there. It was demoed in 2019. So as you can see that Mason the other day goes, I've never seen that tank. I'm like, well, Mason, that's because
Right after I started.
we started in 20,
Yeah.
right after it was gone. This is our Newington booster station. On the right, all the pumps were replaced. On the left, the tank now has mixing and aeration in it. That's done. As you can see, the tank needs to be painted. Well, now that we have this waterline work that's really been, to a certain degree improved on the Little Bay transmission main, we can start pursuing painting, or we're actually looking at maybe instead of painting, we would just replace that tank. So that work is going to happen this fall as far as the engineering and getting that ready to go. It was recommended a water main out in Newcastle, Wild Rose Lane, that had really aged out. It was replaced in 2022. We did this with our own staff. Banbury well upgrades were recommended. So well 4 was replaced in 2015. Well 5 is a brand new well. It was permitted in 2018. And on the right, you can see what the facilities look like completed. The well 5 is up at the top right, and the well 4 below. So again, we went through the drilling, we went through the permitting, the design of the facilities and all that, and it's all done. So these are in service and actually providing us additional peak supply. It's not more water, it's just a better ability to utilize the water we have, manage it sustainably. But on top of that, so those are part of the 23, but I also looked and I'll just give you a snapshot of some other things that we've done that are kind of significant. We worked on some other wells. So the Greenland well in 2018 was fully replaced, that pump house on the right. We like that one, it has a green roof. Green roof for the Greenland well. That whole pump house and well was replaced in 2018. But this year, we worked with DES because when we were concerned about all that work we were doing on the Little Bay transmission main, what would happen if we did lose it and we would be down for 2 weeks? We worked with the state and said, well, we have the existing well at Greenland. Can we make that a backup well? And they said, yes. We went through again. It wasn't necessarily a permit, but we got a letter from them telling us the conditions. So we put a pump in, we tested that water, we pump tested it. We ran it for a few hours together with the existing well. And that site itself is a very good aquifer, a very good well site. We were able to pump that at 900 gallons a minute, which is a significant amount of water. The existing wells took 450. We wouldn't pump 900 gallons a minute 24/7. You eventually, dewater the aquifer. But again, if we had an emergency out there, we would have, additional water on this side of the bay, which would be needed. Collins Well, we're still working on that. The drilling is done and we're working on permitting and all that, but it's sort of tied in with the Portsmouth Collins treatment that I will get to later. And of course, amidst all this, one unplanned project, but one we had to pursue and we accomplished was originally the 2016 installation of the carbon filters for Harrison and Smithwell, and then the full-on PFAS treatment system that was started in 2019 construction and we completed it in 2021. I'll have a little bit more when I do the PFAS revisit here. We also did a backwash tank and pump project, not the best photo of it, but essentially that's a tank out in Madbury, which allows us additional water to do backwashes. Not that we needed more water, it actually changed the way the facility could operate, because when we had to do backwashes, the water, it complicated our existing treatment. So now that's not the case.
What is it, backwash?
Backwash, so we have filters at Madbury that filter the water, they go through sand. And of course, they eventually, fill up with the organics and the materials that are settling out. They'll start plugging up, the best way to say, just like any filter will, and they're not flowing as much water through them. So what you do is you turn them off, you reverse that flow, you pump water through them, you backwash it, it goes to waste. We have tanks and settling area that water goes to, and then it takes 15-20 minutes, and then the filter bed settles out again, and then you're able to water. So backwashing is really a critical part of running the system. And on any given day, we have 6 filters. We might backwash anywhere from 3 to 6 a day, depending on the quality of the water coming in and the amount of flow we're putting through them. We also, and this update is only the, for 10 years time, 2011 to 2020, 24 miles of main. So we're probably at around 30 miles of water main that we've replaced or upgraded. And of course, I went over this before. All these separate studies have occurred, which are all part and parcel. They're not full-blown master plans, but they're focused on a certain aspect of either the water system or a lot of water quality stuff, well investigations, supply investigations. So that's the update. And I went quick on that one, so that's good.
Can I ask a couple questions, Brian?
Some questions, sure.
I'll go right ahead.
Are the lines in from Madbury to the bay and from Newington to Portsmouth?
Yes.
Those are in existence for
Yes.
the new line?
Yes.
So we just have to connect.
Well, the 2 lines at the bay are already there.
No, I'm talking about the third.
The
one.
3rd line, no. What we did was on either side of the bay, we put new taps into the existing main. So they have pipes that come down and they're stubbed off as you get to the bay.
Okay.
Because we can't do work in the water yet. We're working on the permit.
So there's going to be 2 lines in the future. There'll be 3 full lines from
3.
Madbury.
Yes.
Okay. But the lines across land are not there yet. Is that what you're saying?
The 3 lines all the way from Madbury to Newington?
Yeah.
No, it's one single line. These are just the lines that run under the bay.
Okay,
And, you know, that's the
So it's a
most critical
single-
thing. Yeah.
okay, good.
It is a single 24-inch line that comes from Madbury.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that was super helpful. I just wanna say the supply versus demand graph was very helpful, so thank you for adding that in. In terms of the Little Bay, I just had a couple questions. So you said there were 3 phases. One is the new valves, and then the lines, and then what's the third part?
The third part, I think I somehow skipped over that real quick. I think I had a slide for it.
Second
Oh,
part.
yeah, there it is. Yeah, so this, you can't quite see it here, the dotted
Yeah,
line. So that is to pursue interconnection with Dover along Route 4.
okay,
So that study is underway by Underwood.
okay,
And, you know, again, it's future planning. Some may say, you know, why at the moment? You know, it would provide a different alternative for getting water if you couldn't get it through the main line, so.
and then you're gonna replace the 2 lines that are there,
No, the
okay,
2 lines stay.
Yeah.
We'll have a third
okay,
line.
so that's the line work, is
Yeah.
that, okay, so it was just the new valves, but not new lines,
Yeah, the new lines aren't there, the new valves are there, so again, the existing pipes, that if they get a leak, we can shut one off and
Right.
fix it.
Yeah.
And then what we've done is we've tapped here and here on the Newington side and the Durham side, and there is pipe, but it's stubbed off, it's just ready to go, but we have to get in the water to
Right,
install a
right.
third pipe, so.
and there's no permits and stuff for that yet. You're
No, we
working on it.
originally had a permit, but that bid was $26 million.
Right, right,
So we have to come up with a different method and the state has to approve. Our engineer actually employed the contractor that bid on it, and we had them do a review and give us their opinion of, well, how would you build it? And they said, well, we'd use this and this and this, which is a different method. It's a different way to do the work in the water, but anytime you work in the water, especially the tidal waters of the bay and stuff, you have to have the wetlands permit. Yeah.
that's it for this portion, thank you very much.
I just have a question. Do you track usage on the website at all? You mentioned you wanted to put something up on your web pages. I was wondering if there's any.
Like real time,
Or any visitation information. Does the city track that or?
the usage,
Yeah,
our quarterly reports are posted.
like how many people go to the website and? look at
Oh, yeah, I guess we could look at that metric.
I haven't had many people ask questions about it. I don't know
Like
how to look
number
at
of
the
hits,
metric
yeah.
of
You mean
how many
number of
people
visits?
view it.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah,
But we
like
do post it quarterly.
Yeah, what percentage of the Portsmouth or Newcastle residents
Yeah,
access it?
I wish I knew.
Because it's a lot of work for you to put information up and.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It is work in progress, yeah.
it's there fast.
It's there, but I think people just assume that we have good water.
It's a good sign.
Yeah.
All right, so very briefly, many of you have probably heard that the EPA promulgated the standard for some of the PFAS compounds, and I went on their website, they have plenty of information on the website, and I grabbed 3 of the main slides that give a summary of what they've set for the maximum contaminant levels. So right now, they set PFOA and PFOS each at 4 parts per trillion. And then for PFNA, PFHXS, Gen X, which fortunately for us, we aren't dealing with that. That's North Carolina and some other places are dealing with the Gen X. They set it at 10 parts per trillion. So the rule requirements for public systems are you have to do initial and ongoing compliance. And then you have to implement those solutions if you're above the maximum contaminant level. Also inform the public of what the levels are and if an MCL is exceeded. And the timelines, 3 years, all the monitoring has to be complete. So this is something we're not too anxious about because we've been monitoring PFAS for years. Though they don't take past sampling as the start point. But again, we don't feel like we'll have any surprises since we've done so much sampling. We have such a long record. So then those results have to be included in consumer confidence report. Mason we'll talk a little bit more, but our annual water quality report, which some people just got in the mail today, it has a full page. So again, we're on the leading edge of that. Thanks to Andrea, who a few years back said, "Geez, Brian, we should report everything we have for PFAS." So we have been doing that, and again, we're there, and then public notification. And so any system that is above that, you have 5 years, so starting 2029, to actually have treatment. So where do we stand? Certainly for P's, we're in compliance, and that was contamination that far exceeded the initial health advisories, especially for the Haven well, and then eventually for the Harrison and Smith. And then, of course, when the New Hampshire standards came in, the treatment that's there is going to be able to take care of what the new regulatory standard is. And we're currently in compliance with New Hampshire regulations. So the whole regulatory process would take a presentation unto itself. And I talked to Brandon Kernan. The state has like 2 years to implement the enforceable method that they'll do for that. The Greenland well, we are in design right now for the treatment of that. And we are doing some preliminary design for the Portsmouth Collins well. So again, that's why we haven't hooked up that second Collins well, because we're going to roll it all into this project because we're pursuing funds from the Air Force. They haven't got clear direction from Washington yet as to where they stand on that. But again, I think a lot of places are just digesting what the regulations mean. So here's a summary of where do we stand for all these compounds, and we are really as far as Portsmouth well and the Collins and the Greenland are the 3 wells that currently are just right at that 4, right at that 5. So we're working, as I said, the Greenland well, we anticipate this fall putting that out to bid. So for construction, and then the Portsmouth Collins, we're in preliminary design of.
Can I just say something real quick too?
Yeah.
Something off the EPA's website that I found really profound when they finalized these MCLs was they said the final rule will reduce PFAS exposure for approximately 100 million people. So that's a lot of people, and it will prevent thousands of deaths and reduce tens of thousands of serious illnesses. So I know at times the low levels of the MCLs, people have said, do they really need to be that low? That's really low. It's going to cost a lot of money. But I think EPA really looked at that and said, well, the cost to not do it means thousands of deaths, tens of thousands of serious illnesses. So I'm really grateful to see EPA make this big step in the right direction. It's only 6 chemicals of thousands, but it's a big step in the right direction. So I just wanted to point that out, and I think that's a really important point. And then I also just want to say thank you to the city for being proactive with the Greenland well particularly, and also I know with the Portsmouth and Collins well too, and the city council for approving money to get the design and get that going. I mean, we knew 2 years ago the EPA was starting to lower the levels, and then they, set proposed MCLs over a year ago, and the city didn't just wait for this to happen. You have been very proactive, and I just want to say that I really appreciate that. I don't think other water systems do that, or I haven't seen many that do that. So I just want to point out that Portsmouth is unique in that way. And then I also want to say thank you for sharing your data online, because not all water systems do that, or if they do, they share very limited data, especially around PFAS. And so that's another way that the city is unique. Thank you very much for doing that. I think that's important. It sets a good example. Thank you for doing that.
I have talked to many a water system that has said, well, why are you doing that? And I said, well, we have the results. I mean, why not? And then some, eventually, it'll come around to them eventually, because, I mean, if you have sampled, you know, but, you know, some are to the letter, I guess. They say, well, we're only required for these two, and those are the two who report up. Well, so with that, Andrew and I are gonna do a recap. So if you didn't have enough PFAS already, we're gonna load you up with, so I have a chronology. You've heard me talk about PFAS, others have. I know Mason's seen many of talk. I've spoken at conferences, we've shared our information case study wise. So I have a slide deck that's chronological, and it has 130 slides, so you're not gonna get that. I reduced it down to about 50 to 60. And some of them are just photos, because, you know, photos tell a better story than I can. But as you may know, we are dealing with something that 10 years ago, hardly anybody else was. And this takes you through that a little bit. I'm gonna give the water system side of there's many stories here to tell, and my focus, what I've got, is the water system side. Andrew's gonna talk about her involvement and the advocacy and that side, so we kind of split that. There's maybe a third line of story, which is the science and the health. Neither one of us are gonna get directly on that. That's such high level. That's for Laurel and John Vitale, who I don't know if you've heard, he's gone from the state, unfortunately, but thankfully we had him when we had him. So anyway, this is the water system story. So I was able to reduce it down, and in the last couple of weeks, as I've been working on it, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't need to move that one here. So it's chronological. In order to get to that, I went back a little bit in time, because, you know, where did all this really originate? Because people, including Jeff McMenemy the other day, said to me, gee, Brian, you know, when this first happened, what did you think? What did you do? And I said, well, when it first happened, I had no idea what this stuff was. And I've told this story before many times. It's like, you know, when you're a water system and you have, you know, 100 some compounds you're sampling for, if you end up with a non-detect or you're not sampling for it, you move on. You're concerned about the ones you have. You know, what do we have? Arsenic? Do we have you know, high manganese? You know, whatever. Do we have MTBE, which, you know, a lot of systems had a number of years back. So, you know, when this happened, you know, you go back in time, and where did the regulators and where did the rest of the country sit? So 2009 was when EPA set, at the time, their health advisory levels. So PFOA was at 400 parts per trillion, PFAS at 200. In May of 2012, which was, you know, 2 years prior to us, they issued their unregulated contaminant monitoring rule, which said, public water systems, you will sample 6 PFAS compounds for 12 months, but between 2013 and 2015. So it was a pending rule for us to address, but not many systems had done it yet. And so the other thing I did, you know, is, well, what systems actually had PFAS. And Oakdale, Minnesota, that's near 3M. They had an incident in 2004 that they had PFAS detected. Decatur, Alabama, that is again a near manufacturing, and West Virginia, which is the C8 site in 2007. But then, those sites likely are what led to the EPA addressing health advisories and then issuing the USAMR 3. So where do we stand in 2014? I've used this slide before. On the left is the little building where the water came together. You had the 3 wells. We had the Haven, Harrison, and Smith wells, and we had a booster that could pump water from the Portsmouth system into Pease. Everything got combined there. Everything, when the wells turned on, they all turned on together. This was something that was a question of, the Haven well and its contamination. So in 2014, the Haven well itself, so kind of zoom in on that source. The Haven well is actually the oldest water source for the city. It dates back to 1875. It was Haven Springs. It was a Haven farm. And it then became the Haven well. The city took it over in 1900s. Pease Air Base came in '56, and they took that water source. That's when we got the Madbury wells and the Madbury Colony Reservoir. So it was the Pease Air Base from '92. That's and then in '92, when they decommissioned the Air Base, it became Pease Development Authority. But through the Development Authority, we were pretty much had an intermunicipal agreement from day one to operate the water system. So we operate the water system, we operate the sewer system. So up until that time, that's how the well was operated. That's actually the well out there. That's the interior. Pease has a long history, unfortunately, as a Superfund site, but there had been a lot done to address that, and a lot of cleanup, a lot of remedial work. And again, what did we look at when we're running and operating that well? This is sample results from August of 2013, which is the comprehensive testing of the Haven well. And all those parameters you see are non-detect. So again, it's like, well, the well's doing okay. There was additional monitoring going on. Sentry wells that were looking at other contaminants that might affect the well. So what you don't see on that list is any PFAS compounds. So we weren't required to sample it. We didn't, it wasn't on any water systems radar really to sample. So we were contacted in April by New Hampshire DES to sample the wells for PFAS. And then May 12, 2014, we got notified that, hey, the Haven well has exceeded the health standard at the time, which was 200 parts per trillion. The Haven well had a 2,500 parts per trillion result. Since then, we did some follow-up sampling. It was high. We don't believe it was ever 2,500, but it was at least 1,200. When back then, there weren't many labs doing sampling for PFAS or running the tests. So they actually had to dilute the water because the numbers were coming too high for their thing. So through that dilution, we think they ended up with a little bit higher number. Regardless, it's very high. I don't think there's too many wells, certainly not public water wells that were that high. So we shut that well down immediately, and that well was off for years. We did at the time go out through the recommendation of Brandon Kernan at DES. I told Jeff McMenemy that I don't know that anyone in the state could get more credit on the water system side for what's been done for PFAS than Brandon. His recommendations were great. They're spot on. Some of his insight as to what the technology, what the sampling could be. So at the time he said, you need to sample for some more parameters than the 6 that were required. So we did. We did that, but we also decided, well, we better find out if we have it in any of our other water sources. So we did, we sampled the reservoir, we sampled our Madbury wells, we sampled Portsmouth, Collins, and Greenland. At the time, due to the methods and the reporting limits, all those came back non-detect. So again, this is another side story of the whole PFAS story is detection capabilities. And what I would liken that to, I keep looking for maybe someone would have that magic thing. It's sort of like a telescope. You know, we've got telescopes now that can see the stars and the planets that couldn't be seen 20 years ago. It's about the same for laboratory technologies. So anyway, we proceeded to number one, get in the news, and you know, a lot of press, a lot of questions. Where did it come from? Firefighting foam. That's if you go on YouTube, you can find the 135 of fire on January 1990, and you can see in the screenshot that's the fire department putting foam. So firefighting foam, which has a lot of PFAS in it. So what did we know in 2014? Well, at the time, it wasn't called PFAS. Everybody called it PFCs. We found out the health concerns were parts per trillion. So this was new because all other previous water quality compounds for drinking water had been in parts per billion. So wow, parts per trillion. So now, you know, and why? Well, the reason being really it bioaccumulates, and it's not just one thing. There's many variants. You know, the numbers are, you know, are there 4,000? Are there 12,000? You know, different PFAS compounds. You know, there's a lot of variants. So that's what we did learn. But we also, at the time, again, this is May 2014, there were soon to be followed by others. In New Hampshire, we were it. There were no other systems that were dealing with PFAS. Others were soon to get smaller, you know, detections, but we were it. So we didn't have a whole lot of information to go on. You know, it was really to try to tell people what we did know and what we were learning and what we were going to do. So we had a public meeting, May 28th of that 2014. Some say, well, you know, why'd you wait 2 weeks? And you know, to be honest, it was an intense 2 weeks to go from nothing to a public meeting on something brand new in 2 weeks was unreal. My furrowed brow there maybe tells my story. It was some sleepless nights. It was, you know, a lot of meetings, a lot of work, a lot of team effort between various people. And then that led to, on the water system side. So again, you know, we all kind of a little bit had to go our own ways on certain aspects of this. You know, the health side, the DHHSS, but you know, the forensics, as I say, the forensics, where is it? You know, how much of there is it? And you know, what can be done? This on the left side really shows the team that came together working with us. So Air Force had their civil engineers, they had their consultants. EPA Region 1 had representatives, they had hydrogeologists, they had water quality people. The waste division from New Hampshire DES was there, drinking water division, PDA, and of course us with our staff involved in, you know, doing the forensics. We also worked with the Air Force, and they were a willing party, fortunately, to work with us. You know, they did a lot to be side by side with us when we had public meetings to tell us what they themselves were trying to do. And then we through them worked on a lot of, they're called ESCAs, Environmental Services Cooperative Agreements. So there's a lot of things that the regulators and regulations said to the Air Force, you will have to do this. well, it was our water system, so we worked with them and said, okay, we can do this in cooperation with you, but, you know, you need to reimburse us for those efforts. You know, we got consultants, we got, you know, equipment, we got stuff. So they did, and they, to date, continue to be cooperating with us on those agreements. We then moved into, you know, kind of overdrive on the public outreach. Again, we tried to tell everybody what we did know and, you know, when we knew it, best we could. So briefings to city council, information on our website, press releases. The mayor formed the community advisory board, which there we have our chair right there, Rich. And you should be in the photo there somewhere, Rich. It's a screenshot. But that community advisory board was formed in 2015 and met 14 times. So those meetings involved, you know, a number of people that I just mentioned, including, you know, some people on the outside, Andrea, I believe, you know, right there, Newington was involved. And so we met those 14 times, and again, it was like, what do we know? What can we share? You know, I did a lot of system information. There was a lot of back history. The Air Force talked about the firefighting foam. They talked about, and then we talked about what we were going to do. In July 2015, so now we're chronologically, we're about a year and a couple months into it. The EPA issued this order to the Air Force that they had to treat the Haven well. So this is the actual order. And then when they said they had to treat the Haven water, subsequently, we had a meeting right here, actually in this room, with Senator Shaheen, who coordinated it. She was also in town with, they went to the daycare centers with Andrea and others, and Shelley Vetter, and met here. And at the time, this agreement said you'll treat the Haven well and you will design treatment for Harrison and Smith. And we proposed, we said, look, two things could happen. The regulations could drop and the Harrison and Smith that were, you know, detections, but below that 2 and 400, they could now be, you know, regulated to be treated, or the, because the Haven well is off, the concentrations of PFAS that are there could go up. So we think we're going to propose you agree to treat all three, and the Air Force did. So we moved forward with starting design of that. The order also, not to further confuse people, but there are actually 3 treatment systems. The Fire Training Center, which is at the far end of the runway over in Newington, where the most concentrated contamination is, has its own treatment system. The Air Force was also ordered to not only treat the drinking water, but they had to clean the aquifer up. So there's a second facility in the middle of the base area that actually pumps water out of the ground, treats it, and puts it back in. And then the third one was the drinking water treatment. Timeline wise, so here we are about 2 years later is when the Merrimack came to the equation. So you had us, you had some of the other systems, Hoosick Falls had happened, but then Merrimack in New Hampshire, sort of, that was like the final trigger. It's like, no, wait a second, you know, now we've really got it. Merrimack, unfortunately, is a broader issue, as we've all learned, because totally different from us. I want to say totally different, but quite different from what we dealt with. We were firefighting foam that was directly used and put in the ground. This is actually manufacturing that through the smokestacks and through the rainfall, there is a wide area, 50 square miles, don't quote me on that, but quite a bit, that the Merrimack village district wells were contaminated, but there are also a lot of private wells in that area. So our local and federal delegation at the time, very involved. This is Senator Shaheen on the left, speaking as she's done, numerous times, and also, put forth quite a bit of legislation and work behind the scenes for us to advocate, and together with Andrea on a number of issues on the health side. And at the time, Governor and now Senator Hassan was also very active in supporting us. So, we can't overlook the fact that we really had full support and a lot of delegation efforts that have helped us. Pease Restoration Advisory Board, another thing that, when the Superfund site, there used to be a Restoration Advisory Board. It had finished convening a few years prior to the 2014 incident. It was started back up again. So that, Andrea, you might have been the one to take that photo because you're not in it.
I didn't join the rap right away.
Oh, you weren't in the RAP
I
right
just
away. Okay,
attended.
so this was, I believe, maybe the first meeting of the RAP. So the Restoration Advisory Board, which meets quarterly, and Andrea is co-chair of that. That was reinstated. So again, another avenue where people, ask questions, get presented information. There's a little more broad than just the water system. It involved, and as it does now, quite a bit of the focus now is on private wells and the Newington and Greenland area. 2016, we piloted granular activated carbon on the Harrison and Smith wells. That's the actual pilot unit inside the building. May of 2016, EPA lowered their health advisories to 70 and 70 from the 200 and 400 level. And then so carbon seemed to be the quickest way to get to treatment on Harrison and Smith wells. So that's September of 2016. You can see we cut a hole in the roof and dropped a couple filters into treat the water for the Harrison and Smith wells. And this is a graphic of the filters on the right, and that right photo on the left, essentially water, it was dual treatment. So it went through filter 1 and filter 2. And the reason you do that is you're able to know that if one filter, I know we were talking about backwash, but this is the capacity of a filter to actually remove the PFAS. We would sample at 25% and at the effluent of filter 1, and that gave us an indication of how good is treatment working. Do we have to change the media out and that? So that went along good. Weston Sampson was hired by us to do some analysis of, well, what type of treatment is out there right now. So activated carbon was really what we found to be most prevalent. Oakdale, Minnesota, Newcastle, Delaware, another site that was Air Force related. But there were other treatments out there: membrane filtration, anion exchange, and advanced oxidation. And when it comes to the anion exchange, we were actually pursued through our consultant Weston Sampson. They got approached by a firm called ECT2, who said, hey, we think we've got a technology that could really do a better job than carbon. And so we said, fine, prove it. So they brought these little skids, and that's Mark Young, our chief operator, out at the Haven well. The well's not pumping, but we were able to use a small pump and pump water into those pilot units, and they did comparisons. So the one on the top is the resin that they talked about. So you essentially have these columns that mimic full-blown treatment, but you're able to see how it performs on a pilot scale. And the bottom right is the carbon. So you do it side by side, and lo and behold, it's called Sorbix. The resins proved to be, quite good. So we then approached the Air Force about that, and they agreed, okay, you can move on. 2018, just that updates continued. And then in June of 2018, the EPA started to up their outreach. So now timeline wise, I'm not talking about all the other places in the country that this had suddenly appeared, and Michigan had a number of sites. We also had Hoosick Falls, like I mentioned, and then down in North Carolina, the Gen X site. So EPA started having some community engagement. We were asked to speak. Andrea spoke as well. She was on a number of panels too. And at the time, I basically told the story of our system. It stopped right here, 2018, but I provided that information. Where are we at? Where are we going? All that, and that. So the pilot results, like I mentioned, this is the report that came out of that, recommended treatment of resin following that. So with agreement of the Air Force to pursue that, we moved into final design phase. And then this is a schematic, very rough schematic of what that treatment system design was. It was to go through cartridge filters, and those are to take out any large particles that might be coming through the well before they would get to the filters. And so we have 2 resins, and then it goes through GAC. And some may say, well, aren't the resins good enough? We pitched, because resin was a brand new technology, we said to the Air Force and also the DES, because nobody had used resin before in the state, and so they had to approve it. It was easier for them to approve a new technology when you have a proven technology on the back end. So the other is, legacy contaminants at peace. There's Superfund site, there's other things that we hope aren't there any longer, but should they happen to come upon us, we have carbon. So carbon can treat more than just PFAS. So anyway, that was the design. Here's a 3D rendering of what it looks like. It's 6 sets of dual, resins. So 12 resin vessels up front on the right side, and then behind it 3 granular activated carbon. And then this was a rendering when we put it out to bid, January of 2019. Kinsman Corporation was a low bidder. So we broke ground in April 2019. Here's some shots of some of the construction. By middle of 2019, the Air Force had completed their treatment system. So they had switched themselves to a resin. So because of they were going to just do a carbon system, but because of some of the piloting we had done, and they too got approached, but they had the data from us that helped them say, yeah, we'll do some resin treatment ourselves. We've been sharing this, so unfortunately by 2019 there were other water systems dealing with us. There was Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont. So when we had this field day, August of 2019, we took everybody through our facility as it was being constructed, and our engineers really gave an overview of what we'd done and where we were going and that. And these are all just, they're consultants, they're water system people through New Hampshire Water Works. October, this is the 3 carbon vessels being loaded into the new building. There's the new building. go down Grafton, you'll see that whole thing. It's like, the reason it's so tall, those vessels are tall, so. This photo is my favorite photo of all. It shows the demolition of the existing building with the making room, the new building, but those pipes on the right side continue to pump water. They're not exposed to the air or anything. But the 3 wells are, it's kind of tough the way the display is right now with the sun setting behind us, but there's the 3 wells. And they were going where I'm standing and taking the photos where the 2 filters were at the time. And they had demoed all the building and left the 1 wall there and then started building the rest of the building around it. 2020, so July of 2020, New Hampshire had proceeded. This is another side story. There's a lot of work, the legislative area, advocacy, and also, promulgated rules through legislature, and New Hampshire set lower limits of those 4 compounds, so not just PFOS, PFOA, but PFHXS and PFNA, and those are the numbers on the right. And when there was an article in the paper, the photo of our treatment on the left. October 2020, the Safe Water Advisory Group was formed, so us, here we are. The impetus of that, a mission to review and communicate latest science and health, environmental effects, heavy focus on PFAS to monitor federal and state level legislative, and policy changes that could impact the city of Portsmouth. So this committee itself, and then this was a screenshot of our water forum that was held May of 22. So now we get into also in October, the rest of the building is going up for P's. Here's the resins, and the carbon is behind them. So you saw the 3D rendering. This is what they look like in real time. 2021, April, we got a notice from the state that they approved the system to be fully operational, and it was done. So 2 years, photo on the left when it started, photo on the right when it was done, and on time, on budget, close to $11 million for the construction, very few change orders. That's a biggie. A lot of people ask, oh, a lot of change orders, because a lot of projects will have change order. Anytime a change order happens, it's usually going up. So it means, oh, you missed this, you missed that, or this is going to need to be bigger, that kind of thing. That didn't happen, fortunately. Again, all of it reimbursed through the Air Force, through environmental services cooperative agreements. We have continued agreements with them because it costs more to operate that facility. That differential is also reimbursed. So in the budget, we told council this close to $1 million this year is in the budget that is in the agreement with the Air Force to reimburse us, because those filters have to be changed out. We've got staffing. This just doesn't get operated by nobody, and it is a significant amount of work beyond what it was before. And then the additional, more heat, more energy, all that. So here's the dedication that happened May of 21. I neglected to say that we constructed that whole facility during COVID. So a lot of people wearing masks and distancing, including our contractors. And that was, you would think, well, that's going to really slow down the project. Fortunately, that didn't. And there's Al Pratt showing, giving a tour of the system to Senator Sheen and Representative Pappas and Senator Hassan. So once the system was up and running and we had confidence in how it was doing, it was time to turn the Haven well on. So August 3rd, this is the day we turned the Haven well on. And fortunately, all was well. It ran, and to date, we've got really good performance. So this is more of a graphic timeline of all the things I talked about here, there, and this is the latest data through March of this year. We're close to 700 million gallons of water treated through that site. The PFAS non-detect for the, and this graph will continue to be updated because of the new regulations for the EPA, but for the New Hampshire standards, non-detect, and we do sample monthly, so we sample not just the discharge, again, like we said, certain points of the filters, because we've changed out the media a couple times. We move into 2022, and in June of 22, the EPA issued new health advisories. We continued, so we didn't just stop, and today we still haven't stopped our analysis of what's going on. There is sanitary well monitoring. If you're ever driving around Pease and you see like a car or a pickup truck parked on the side of the road, you're shaking your head, yes. Yeah, you have. So that is actually the consultant that works for the Air Force, getting water out of monitoring wells that get sampled that tells us, what's the PFAS level. Again, like I mentioned, water quality reports have been updated. This little snapshot from 21. I like using that report because that was the report that showed, the Pease actually going, into service. We're continuing to pilot. So this is Tim Green next to our pilot system. So we continue to look at other alternate resins, and it's not a heavy lift to do it. And again, this is something the Air Force has agreed to, because through that we can keep finding something that does a better job, if there is something that does a better job, because we're constantly pursued by people like, hey, we've got, because believe me, it's a market now. So there are a lot of firms, ironically, including 3M. And in my book, it's like, well, if 3M has treatment, then tell them they just have to bring it here, and then we're taken care of. So anyway, I shouldn't joke about that. There's something heavy. So we do this. This is ongoing. This is happening just the other day. We were showing Jeff McMenemy from the paper. Tim was giving him a little tour of that. Regulations. So in 2023, that's when the EPA proposed the PFAS compounds. And this, so I guess this is the summation. 10 years later, where are we? So like I said, that little star on the bottom left, that's where we were in 2014. We were the sole system in New Hampshire dealing with this. And this is constantly being updated on the right side. So New Hampshire has been very aggressive. This is the story they can tell about all the things that they've done forensically. They issued schools to sample, all the fire departments in the state, because unfortunately, some small fire departments, I was in Kingston for 10 years, and the Kingston Fire Department sampled their well, and they had PFAS, and then, how did that get into their well? They didn't fight a fire there with the firefighting foam, but when and maybe I should turn over to Bill to say, but you have the foam, and maybe you fought a fire, but you come back to the station and you clean your equipment. So that's what a lot of stations did. And again, to some degree, that's best practice, with the exception of, now we know that, firefighting foam isn't so great to get in the groundwater. So right now, through this graphic, and these are a lot of private wells and some public systems, 27% exceeded of over 12,000 wells sampled in New Hampshire, 27% exceed at the time the New Hampshire standard. So that number will, unfortunately, it's gonna go up when you go from, the 12 and the 15 that the state's at down to the 4. So with that, I get to stop talking. I'm gonna turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you for that recap. I only have about 5 slides and I'm gonna try to boil down 10 years into 5 minutes for you all. But thank you, Brian, for sharing the water side of the story. Yeah, geez. So I often like to start telling my story that I say, 10 years ago, my life changed forever when I read a newspaper article. So that's how I learned about the contamination. I read a newspaper article about PFCs, they were calling it at the time, being found at the Haven Well and it being shut down. And that caught my attention because my 2 children were attending daycare at Pease and my husband was working for a company there. And so it just caught my attention that, I guess to preface, I'm an occupational therapist. I work in healthcare. Water contaminants and environmental issues is not something I'm well trained in, but something I quickly had to learn more about. And so when I first read that newspaper article, it really caught my attention. I was worried about my babies, my toddler who was at Pease drinking water every day at daycare, my husband. And so I attended that meeting on May 28th that Brian talked about and started asking questions. One of the things I had learned was that PFAS can bioaccumulate in the body and in the blood. And so I really started pushing for health, blood testing at the time. That was my big focus was, can we get blood testing? Can we better understand how these chemicals are in the body and at what levels? And so really even now, PFAS blood testing is not super mainstream. But at the time it was definitely not mainstream. And so the only place I could really access that was through New Hampshire DHHS and started advocating for several months for some PFAS blood testing for my family. And after months and months of just not getting anywhere and eventually just stopped getting responses, I called the Portsmouth Herald as like a last ditch effort to see if they would write a story. So in January of 2015, the middle article here, there was a front page article about just asking for accountability and wanting help blood testing. And so that's really where I think things started picking up momentum. And I later on in 2015 into 2016 formed a group called Testing for Peas. After that article ran, there was a lot of interest, particularly daycare parents, people that worked at Peas, who were saying, yeah, I'm concerned too. I want to know how this is affecting my health. And so I had people like texting me and calling me, and I had a landline at the time still, and I would get voicemails on my home line from people saying like, I saw you in the paper and I'm concerned. So formed this group called Testing for Peas, and really our initial focus was that blood testing. That's why we're called Testing for Peas. We've never really changed our name, but 2 women pictured here, Elena Davis and Michelle Dalton, also mothers of children at daycare. Elena and Michelle also both worked at Pease and were exposed themselves. And so we formed this group. And if you want to go to the next slide. We eventually were successful in getting the state to offer a PFAS blood testing program to the Pease community. Initially, it was going to be limited to 100 adults. And we said that's not acceptable. There's thousands of people that work at Pease. There's lots of children. So they did end up expanding that. And around this time in 2015 is when the CAB formed, as Brian mentioned. Rich was the chair, and that was really at the city level. We were meeting to talk about this, and we did have blood testing that did show high levels of PFAS in the blood of the Pease community. And then that really prompted the community to say, well, okay, what do we do about that? It wasn't just enough to say you have these chemicals in your blood at high levels, but like, now what? And so we were advocating strongly for health studies. At this time, we started working with a federal health agency called ATSDR, Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. They met with our community for the first time in 2015 and formed a CAP in 2016, Community Assistance Panel, where we started laying the foundation for feasibility assessments on health studies and things like that. If you want to go to the next slide, Brian. And, you know, that was definitely something that hadn't been done before in terms of a health study on PFAS being done by the government. There was no funding structure in place for that. There were no protocols in place for that. So we were really at the cutting edge of advocating for that. Thankfully, we had Senator Shaheen, who was, you know, a champion for us in finding ways to get the Air Force to pay for the health study. That was definitely a big barrier that we had to overcome. And as Brian mentioned, around this time, so many other communities had found their contamination as well. It wasn't just us, which in some ways was terrifying, and in other ways was, for me, like comforting. I started connecting with a lot of other communities across the state as well as across the nation, and sharing information and telling them what we were doing and hearing what they were doing, and, you know, helping people, which has been part of this work that's been what has kept me going, because as I said, you know, I'm a mom, I have a full-time job. Like, PFAS advocacy for me is really in my free time. So being able to connect with other people and share information and inspire each other is what's helped keep me going for the last decade. So where we're at in terms of, you know, we ended up having 2 health studies, which if you want to go to the next slide, we ended up having a CDC ATSDR funded health study at Pease, and then we also worked with Laurel Shader, who's on our swag but not here tonight, Silent Spring Institute. They also were able to get some federal funding for a small children's health study as well. And where we stand on those 2 studies is both of them have collected information, collected the data, but we don't have any overall community results yet. The only thing we know about the Pease study right now is that the PFAS levels in the Pease community have dropped since we were initially tested back in 2015. So that's a good thing. The water contamination, we have filtration now. That exposure has stopped. We're seeing levels in our blood decrease over time, which is great, but our levels are still elevated when compared to the general population. So something to keep in mind, but we don't know health effects yet. They're still analyzing that data. Also for the PFAS REACH study, that just ended recruitment the end of April. So we don't have any, I think folks have gotten some individual data from those studies, but we don't have a community aggregate data. So one thing that's been tough in this process is that it's taken time. You know, I think like 10 years and we're still waiting on health study results, and you know, we just got regulations, and in some ways you talk to people and they're like, that's like lightning speed when it comes to government stuff. But when you're a parent who has children who drink highly contaminated water, 10 years to not still have a lot of answers feels like a really long time. So that's, you know, that's been a challenge of the community for sure. If you want to go to the next slide. But just speaking to some of the amazing progress that's happened, you know, we initially in New Hampshire, we saw New Hampshire go out in front of the EPA a couple of years ago and set their own unprecedented standards for PFAS, and they were quite low. And that was as a result of, you know, based in science, but also strong grassroots advocacy work, not just from Pease, but many other communities across the state advocating. You know, we were hearing from people in Merrimack, we were hearing people on the Seacoast about a cancer cluster. And so there was this concerted effort to come together and push for regulations in New Hampshire, and that was awesome that we did that. And then, you know, we just had the EPA set new limits that are even stricter than New Hampshire. And again, as I said earlier, they base that in saving lives and preventing chronic illnesses, so that's huge. And another thing that we don't really touch upon, but the EPA also has designated PFOA and PFOS as hazardous substance. That's really important in terms of Superfund law and holding polluters accountable. And that's, you know, we're already benefiting from Superfund laws over at Pease, and that's already helped us in our process, but there's many communities out there that not having that designation has left them without any responsible party or polluter to pay for all of these things. And we're very fortunate that we have had that. So I would just say, you know, the blood testing program was our first big hurdle. The health studies were the next big hurdle. The regulations have been a big hurdle. But, you know, the last 10 years have been some of the most meaningful work of my life. And I'm just really grateful for it. So if you want to move to the last slide, these are just like some pictures. This is probably part of the talk that I feel, I don't want to talk about myself, but this work has also just brought so many amazing opportunities that I never thought was possible. So For example, I went to the State of the Union with Senator Shaheen as her guest back in 2019 to raise awareness about PFAS contamination at a national level. I've been asked to testify in front of the US Senate twice by Senator Hassan. I have met 2 EPA administrators and had meetings in DC. At the EPA, I had a child, a 3rd child through all of this, and that at the top right picture is her and I at the first national PFAS conference. She had to come with me. I have been given an award from the EPA. I've been asked to speak at the CDC. I have been in a documentary about PFAS contamination at military bases, and I gave a TED Talk here in Portsmouth at the Music Hall back in 2019. So I never in my mind ever thought I would ever do any of these things. It's been an absolutely wild and incredible journey. I say some days it's like the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. But yeah, I think that's, I don't want to go over my 5 minutes, but essentially, the community perspective, it's been an uphill battle, but I have found comfort in meeting other advocates who help share in the journey and help continue. And we've had so many, I've met so many amazing people along the way. Our congressional delegation has been so incredibly supportive. And yeah, I guess I'll just put a period.
Rich had I'm gonna close these curtains here a little bit for you. You had a question?
Yeah, I just want to say that we started this whole thing with the CAT like in 2015. We did the blood testing and we had amazing amount of blood levels of children and adults were ridiculous. We get some good support from DHHS, Dr. Chan from DHHS data epidemiologist did some great work in analyzing the results. But the frustrating thing was, what do you tell parents, kids or themselves that have very high levels of PFAS in terms of what are the health effects? What do you tell their physician when their physician calls and says, my patient was just in here and they've got this level of PFAS? What does that mean to me as a physician? What do I test for? What do I look for in these kids and these adults? What's going to happen to them as a result? So the frustrating part of that's still an ongoing mystery in some regards. We have more information now about some of the health effects, but it's still a big piece that's missing. And that's the part that's going to be, I think, the real bottom line in all this is what is this going to mean for people long term in terms of their health effects? As kids grow up, is this going to affect their ability to have children? Is this going to affect their immune systems in some way? Is this going to result in testicular cancer in some kids? So these are the things that we need to think about long term. We're just beginning to emerge. It was a 10-year process, but it's not over yet.
No, it's not. No, I ended my TED Talk, if anyone saw it, but I run into people who are like, oh, you're still working on water stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I'm never gonna stop, because I say I'm just as persistent as PFAS. But it's true, like I, in my mind, have said, this will be lifelong work because it will constantly evolve. I say also PFAS is like an onion. We just keep peeling back the layers. We talk about water in this group, but farms in Maine have been hit really hard, and it's in our food source, it's in our air, it's in the ocean spray. It's just, they're everywhere, and it's a big issue.
What's that movie that we saw?
Oh, Dark Waters?
Dark Waters. If you haven't seen that movie, Dark Waters, I recommend you watch it. Mark Ruffalo is the star of it. I recommend, if you haven't seen Dark Waters, that will give you a whole very interesting perspective on this.
This came up when we toured the Peace site, but what happens to the resin when it's changed? I forget the answer to that. Where does it go?
Goes into a Class C landfill, which is essentially a seal landfill. So.
In New Hampshire?
No, it goes South Dakota, Idaho. I think so.
Yeah, I've heard
South Dakota, I think.
I've heard Michigan too,
And
from the Air Force.
When you install the resin to go with the carbon, did that prolong the life of the carbon? Did you notice an increased lifespan of it?
oh yes.
About how much?
Well, that's data we're still analyzing. So we haven't got to a point yet where we actually have full parameters on when those change outs, we've really, unfortunately, again, the Air Force has agreed to it. We're changing them out probably sooner than they would have to be changed out. So they're, we've changed out all the resin filters. So we did half of them last year and the other half this year. And 2 of the carbon vessels. So the third one is still the original, but it's still. So it does, yeah, it greatly extends the life.
That's a good part.
But if we had just carbon, given the higher concentrations, we'd be changing it. We'd probably be on a cycle of 2 or 3, because there would have to be a dozen of them. We'd be 2 or 3 every 3 or 4 months.
So the cost benefit is there for the user.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what we went through, the cost benefit, the operational benefit.
Right.
That was a lot. That was great. I mean, it was
And
sad.
and I think Brian's hinted, the Herald is gonna run an article on the 10-year, look back at Ps, and I know they did interview multiple people for that article. So hopefully that'll run later this week, we're hearing maybe, but that's great, much appreciated. Next on our agenda, I just wanted to flag that there was a national PFAS conference that took place a couple weeks ago in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This is the 4th that has happened. The first one started back in 2017 in Boston. The first 2 were actually in Boston. 2 years ago, it was in North Carolina, and this year it was in Michigan. And the hope for these national conferences is that they will move locations every time to places where there's, very well-known PFAS contamination. So that community and that story can be kind of front and center for the conference, but also with a diverse group of speakers. So there is a website that it will have the videos of all the presentations. It was a 3-day conference. And if you just want to go to the next slide, this just is some highlights. About 350 people attended. There were 80 people waitlisted. The one thing that's very unique about the conference that I have always really appreciated is it's many different attendees. So it's not just a scientific conference or just a community conference or just, regulators. It's a very diverse group of people from impacted community members, scientists, legislators, NGOs, regulators, physicians, lawyers, journalists, and it covers a variety of topics. And it also has this unique model where every panel, which is often 4 speakers, always has an impacted community member presenting kind of their community story that goes with that panel, and then followed by scientists or regulators or other people. And that always seems to ground people in why we're doing the work that we're doing. And so I just wanted to make people aware. I did attend it. I've been to all 4, and I helped plan the first 2 when they were in Boston. And that there will be a 5th one in 2 years. There's some locations being floated around. We're not sure where those will be, but lots of useful information on that website if you want to check that out. You can go to the next slide, please. And then this goes along with the conference, but I talked a lot about how I've connected with a lot of other impacted community members across the country. So out of the first PFAS conference in Boston in 2017, we had a handful of community members come, and it was after that conference that we decided there were people from Michigan, Colorado, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and we were like, hey, we should meet and talk, and and from there we formed this group called the National PFAS Contamination Coalition. And it continues to grow. Right now we have 48 grassroots community groups over 26 different states. We meet monthly, and we're all really different in the sense that some of us are from military communities, some are from industry communities like Merrimack in North Carolina. We have firefighters in our group. Different people who are exposed to PFAS in different ways, but we have a common goal of really just turning off the tap on contamination and regulating PFAS as a class. And so here's some pictures from the last few conferences. So you can see kind of every conference we get more and more participation and people from the impacted communities who can come. So it's been really nice to see that group grow, and a big part of the reason why I continue to do the work that I do. It makes me not feel alone, and it makes me feel understood. So next slide, please. Over to Mason.
All right. Gonna take a huge.
Can I prelude the Mason talk?
Sure.
So those of you You've seen Mason at the last few meetings, and Mason's with us 5 years. And just yesterday, he was promoted to, and now I get to, here's the punchline, whatever, Assistant Water Resources Manager, so job well done, Mason. No pressure now.
Yeah.
No pressure. That's what I
Yeah,
keep
some
telling them.
shoes to fill over here for sure. That was great. I mean, that was a lot, but 10 years time, you know, I'm sure it flew by fast for you guys, but a lot of work and it's not overlooked at all. I'm gonna take a huge right-hand turn and talk about lead as a whole, from the free lead testing to the service line inventory that we've been working on for quite some time. The slides are gonna look the same, but I promise you they're updated, and there's only 10 this time, so. So I guess just brief overview, talking points of the presentation. We'll start with the free lead testing and all the data associated with that, including the outreach analysis, and the lead and copper rule revision, which the service line inventory falls under. And then we'll end it with the new annual water quality report or the consumer confidence report. So yeah, as we discussed and what was mentioned in the Safe Water Advisory Group originally, the free lead testing opportunity through the city of Portsmouth was released in October 5th of last year. We've had many forms of outreach, including the Portsmouth Herald, city newsletters, postcards that we printed and distributed during the Lead Poisoning Prevention Week and at public facilities throughout the city. Residents have also been notified through the service line inventory process, which we'll dive a little deeper into and just review from last time. Just a brief rundown of how that's going. We have 49 responses to the outreach so far, but only 24 of them have submitted their samples and received results for that. Which means that, you know, about the other half have yet to sample, have either collected their kits from the lab and haven't carried out the process fully, or just completely forgot about it, haven't showed up to the lab at all. So I did reach out to them recently and sent them reminder emails. Surprised to see I got, you know, 6 responses and said that they would carry out the process. So it's only a matter of time. I haven't seen any data with that yet, and 1 opted out. So yeah, the breakdown of the results, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, this graph of every sample that was collected and submitted to the lab. The red line at the top, again, is the 10 part per billion action level. If that's exceeded, there's more cause for concern. Technically, right now, the 10 parts per billion action level is not yet in place. It's still 15. But we like to stay proactive and just make sure people are aware of what's to come with the regulation. So the highest reported detection was 4.1 parts per billion, and that was collected from a 2nd or 3rd floor bathroom tap, which could very well be the fixture itself. These are the sample tap locations and a breakdown of how many samples were collected at each type of location. The biggest one being the 1st floor kitchen tap, which we recommend, you know, collecting from your most frequently used and where you consume water the most, I guess. Bottom right-hand corner was just the effective forms of outreach. The newspaper being the biggest one that people heard about this free lead testing opportunity through. So the timeline, again, you probably all remember this from last time, but I changed up everything to be more internal, kind of how we started talking about the service line inventory process and what's been done so far. So in February 5th of this year, that was when we officially rolled out the door-to-door process and the scheduling of service line inspections for all of our residents in Portsmouth who fall on our public water system. We had at that time 1,718 unknown service line materials at that time. So pushing forward into May 22nd of this year, The distribution crew staff did begin potholing efforts to identify the unknown city side service lines, which were required to identify both sides. We'll dive into that just a little further. I guess it's just, I'll say it quickly, it's split ownership with your service line that leads into your property. So from the shutoff valve inward toward the property is the customer or citizen's responsibility. And from the shutoff valve outward toward the street, toward the water main, is ours. If you have a lead service line, which some municipalities do, if from the shutoff valve inward toward the property is lead, then it is the customer's responsibility to replace that. There's talk about funding, but we haven't received it yet to help people out with this process, but hopefully that comes along. So pushing forward into May 31st, we successfully identified and exhausted all forms of outreach and just scheduled identifications through zones 1 through 3, which you'll see the map on the next slide. Yeah, I guess go back for a second. Sorry, let me just finish talking about that. We had a total of 813 services visually inspected, and huge props to the water meter crew on the distribution side of the coin for carrying out this process. That means they've physically visited 813 properties from February 5th to the end of May and carried out the process of inspecting the lines. Continued identification efforts with zones 4 and 5, that is ongoing right now, but outreach letters have been sent out. People have received them. I'm starting to get more calls about scheduling those identifications. And the overall inventory status, today we have 905 customer side services left to identify, and 91% of those identified so far are copper, which is a great sign. Yes, so now we'll bleed into the updates by zone. So zone 1 and zone 2 are just the older parts of town, kind of the downtown area of Portsmouth. And this is the breakdown by zone. So I know at the bottom of each pie chart, I said total service connections within zone 1. Really, that was the total unknown service connections that we didn't have record of. So we had 365 to start. We exhausted all outreach efforts, and we didn't identify 99 of them out of the 365, but 225 of them, the blue is copper. It's a little difficult to distinguish between ductile iron and HDPE. High density polyethylene is the type of material that is. We had 21 galvanized located in that zone, 16 galvanized lines in zone 2, and 173 copper in zone 2. So moving on to zone 3, which was just wrapped up toward the beginning of this month. We had 372 unknown materials of these connections within the zone. 196 of them were copper. 164 just did not respond to our different forms of outreach. We went around to every property within each of these zones, and first it started with an initial outreach letter to notify them of our efforts, and then 3 separate visits to each individual home to leave door tags on their door. And we haven't received, a lot of responses to our efforts to get a hold of people. Zone 4 is ongoing, so there's 258 left to identify, and same with zone 5. This is the overall snapshot of what we're dealing with on, again, referring to the customer-owned portions of the service lines. So out of all of our service connections, which there are 8,382, we've identified 7,470 in total. So we have 904 remaining, which is 11% left of our total service lines. There's no sign of a lead service line out of all of those identifications, and we have 136 galvanized services found so far, which will require public notification to these homeowners with these service lines. There's complications with galvanized, the first one being they're reaching the end of their lifespan. They can really cause issues on the front of breaking, leaking, causes a lot of time, effort, money for the homeowner to change out. But the biggest one being if it was ever upstream or downstream of a lead connector, jumper, component of any sort, lead can bind to galvanized and potentially leach into the drinking water to the point where it causes health concern. So key takeaways and next steps, just for this whole inventory. We have to submit this inventory on October 16th of this year. Like I said, zone 4 and 5 are currently underway. And the city side potholing continues in targeted developments to better, narrow down the number of unknowns on our side. We must replace 100% of the lead service lines, which we don't have any so far, and the galvanized requiring replacement within 10 years. We have to identify all of these unknown service lines no matter what, but we have a 10-year timeline to do that if we don't submit every known. So if we still have unknowns when we submit the inventory in October. And then I guess we'll just skip down to the lead and copper roll compliance sampling, which happens every year through the city of Portsmouth and every public water system throughout the country is about to start next week. And that's a total of 60 samples that we have to collect.
That's us, so then P's has to collect 20.
No, so that's total across 3 systems.
Oh.
Yeah, so 30 for Portsmouth, 20 for Pease, 10 for Newcastle. And that's pretty much it. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Questions. Thank you very much for the update. In terms of the outreach, I'm wondering if maybe social media might be a way to get the word out there. I don't know. I think the city has a Facebook page, right? Does DPW have a Facebook page? Or a Twitter maybe?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, sorry, X.
But
Is that an option to maybe share the flyer on social media? I don't know if you have it.
Yeah, I haven't dealt with that per se. That
Okay.
kind of would be up Stephanie's alley.
Because there's funding to do 200 samples, right? Total?
100.
100,
Yes.
okay, and so 49 kits have gone out, but 24 haven't come back, so there's still potentially like 50 more opportunities for people in the city if they want to be tested.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if we could consider like a social media post maybe as another way to reach people, and then also, I know Kim, she's not here tonight, but had shared information at the farmer's market. I think the city has a tent at
yeah,
times.
we can do that.
Yes, we have done that. in the
That might
past.
be, I think, like this is certainly prime farmers market season, so maybe just thoughts that came to my mind in terms of trying to kind of get some more people to participate if they're interested. And then I just had a question about, so I think it was last year, someone from DPW came and replaced my meter. So is that when they do the line inspection as well?
Yeah, so we're
Okay.
tackling both at the same time.
Okay.
If that's the case for the specific property. So we're actively keeping record of all of these change outs that are due every 10 years.
Okay,
If someone calls and tries to schedule an inspection through me, I'm able to see that in the database, and then we kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
So if you weren't contacted
right,
about, hey, we need to inspect, it's because
they did
we
it,
already have that information.
got it.
Yes.
Okay, and then, yeah, I'm just curious, why do you suppose, because I think you had showed like 164 people just hadn't responded, at least in zone 3 maybe it was. What do you think are people's hesitation, and is it that they don't understand what you're trying to gather for information, or is it common, like, I know at times assessments get done for tax purposes, that people just feel
Rentals.
Yeah,
resistant? Oh, okay,
We
yeah, I'm just
talked
curious what the
about this.
barriers
I don't wanna
might be.
jump ahead of me, but-
multi-families will, is
Yeah.
definitely a huge,
Okay,
aspect of that, where I don't think tenants will see that information as just, it's the landlord's issue.
okay.
Yeah.
But then there's other calls that I've received where they're like, if you come and inspect my service line and it's lead, you're gonna force me to do something about it. It's more of a statement than a question.
I see.
But it was kind of like, oh, okay, and I have had a few calls like that where they've completely just said, I'm not gonna schedule anything with you and you're not gonna come to my property, so.
Okay.
It was kind of left like that, and I think there's hesitation there. I reassure them over the phone that there's nothing that we can do. It's not like we can just sit there and say, this is galvanized, you need to replace it right now. Now, eventually, there is gonna come a time through legislation where those are gonna have to be changed out, but we're gonna be able to hopefully assist them in the cost of doing it. So. Welcome.
Okay, we're gonna turn it over to Audrey. She's gonna share some information about a new role that she has.
Sure, and I will do it quickly because it looks like we have more to talk about in 10 minutes. So in May, I started a position called the Great Bay Changemaker Program Coordinator, which is basically coordinating a program around Great Bay to get community members involved in learning more about water resources. So the program aims to educate, train, and hopefully inspire people to become champions for water resources in their communities and participate in public office or join a conservation commission or on a lower level to different types of community outreach and involvement. Last year, there was a pilot project in the Cocheco River watershed, and it was pretty successful. About 20 people participated in a 8-week boot camp to learn about different water resource issues and how to get involved. And then so the Charitable Foundation, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation funded this to continue on, and this year we're focusing on the Lamprey River watershed. Part of the work is doing these workshops in the fall. And actually David and Andrea have agreed to participate in our workshops, which is great. But we do, since we're in the Lamprey watershed, we are meeting with town managers and local folks to get their input on what kind of issues are in their communities. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the town administrator for Epping, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot about their wastewater treatment plant. Yeah, that's the gist of it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to chat. I have a little web link too that tell you a little bit more about it. But
Thank you. Thanks for sharing and congratulations. Congratulations, Mason, too.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Oh, I forgot, sorry, backtrack, Mason, water quality report is out, so if you haven't received yours in the mail, which people have already gotten already, so these are going out, and they'll also be on our website. Stephanie's in the process of getting them up. They're posted, so thank you, Stephanie, she has posted all. So there's you just have the Portsmouth one, but there's a Newcastle, which is very similar to Portsmouth, but they get Portsmouth water, and then there's a Pease one, so the Newcastle and Pease ones are on the website, so.
Great, thank you. All right, we're gonna go to the next slide, please. So at the end of our last SWAG meeting, we had talked about the possibility of revising our mission, because when this group was first formed back in 2020, the thought was, I think a little bit more that it might be more short term and it was gonna have a heavy focus on PFAS, but as we talked about last group, our group has really evolved to talk about other water concerns in the city, whether that's lead or conservation efforts or different projects to help maintain our water system. And I think this group has evolved into something that's, been amazing and wonderful and more comprehensive. And so in our report to the city council, Brian and I had drafted this bottom part here about, it's important to note at SWAG meetings, we've consistently covered topics on city's water quantity, quality, preservation, and conservation efforts, and projects pertaining to the water master planning through the city's annual capital improvement plan process and other engineering studies. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. I basically just took that and used that to kind of modify a draft mission that I just wanted to share with everyone tonight. And I think it probably makes the most sense to maybe take a vote on this maybe next meeting, give people, I don't know, what do you think, Brian? Give people time to think about it or see if they have any changes, but essentially I just kind of modified the mission based on that line that we had put in our report to city council at the end of last year. Just to be more inclusive and comprehensive of the topics that we do cover. And again, we wouldn't have the ability to change that. That would be something that would have to go to the mayor and the city council, but I just wanted to put this draft out there and have people start thinking about it. Maybe we can take a formal vote on it at our next meeting. So does anybody have any questions or?
Proposed draft change, so.
Sorry, that I've signed. What was the last part?
Proposed draft change to the mission statement.
Yeah, so this is it here,
Okay.
and we can send it through email, but I wanted to just
Yeah,
present it at
send
the meeting. I know sometimes we're not supposed to do things over email, so that's why
Well, it's,
to start with
It'll
putting
be-
it at the meeting, but
you know, the best thing to do is refer to it. The presentation will be on the website, and this will be a slide in that presentation.
I might be happy to include this language in the minutes.
okay,
Yeah, and it'll be in the minute.
that'd be great, yeah. Follow all the rules, but essentially I just want to help you understand where the language for this revised mission came from was really from the report that we sent to city council that talked about all of the topics that we do tend to discuss in this group, and
It
so.
somewhat codifies what we're doing, so I mean, I didn't wanna take exception to changing a mission when I feel we're already doing that. So that's my view is, you know, this, you see what I do, what Mason does, what we talk about. I mean, water systems are two things, quality and quantity. And we talked about those.
Yeah.
As we
How's
learned.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think this is just clarifying things, it's not changing anything we're doing, we've already been talking about the lead, we're talking about anything that's gonna affect our water and not make it safe. But I think this is just clarifying things, and then we just kind of,
As we learned from PFAS, you don't know what's gonna come next week. It may be a whole new
It's just-
adventure in terms of water quality and how it affects public health. So
Give me updates.
Not only what we need to know about, we need to think about not only what we know about, we have to think about what potentially could be,
Oh, sure.
we face with water quality.
Yeah, and I think I touched on the last meeting, but in fairness, when this group first formed, it was really, I know for me, it was 2 or 3 councils ago, talking to some counselors at the time about how can we have this mechanism to share information with the city about PFAS stuff, and bring concerns forth, because it was like, do we go to public comment and share information? Do we send emails? And is it a school board issue or a fire department issue? And so initially the focus I think was very kind of narrow and like, how do we share information about PFAS? But our group has evolved to talking about more things, and I think it's been a much more valuable conversation overall to include all of these things. And so I take the blame for having a very narrow mission early on, and I'm pleasantly surprised at how much it has evolved, and it brings a lot of value.
I don't wanna totally speak for Mason or Al, but I believe, the feedback we've gotten at these meetings has helped us, feedback we get. Initially, we can say, whoa,
It's not often you get, people out in the public reaching out to us and asking these sorts of questions and, forcing conversation onto us to talk about it. We're happy to talk about it, and I think in the grand scheme of things, all of the things that we talk about in these meetings are posted somewhere in the city website or, in press releases and public notification, stuff like that. So I think, if there's another avenue to get people to watch these meetings, then that's great. I hope people are. But yeah, I think we're very transparent, and we will be.
I would just say that I think it's a good idea to update the mission statement as you go. Maybe next year we'll do something more, it has evolved, this group has evolved since Rich and I have been on it, and it's very important, we learned a lot.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for being here, being on it. I think Brian, you might take this last one.
So next meeting will be in September, and talked to Andrea when we were talking about the agenda, she said, well, Brian, we've talked about other field trips. We've had a field trip during COVID that we went to the Madbury water treatment facility. Took a tour of that. We had another meeting where we were at Pease and went through that facility. And of course, we meet here, and we can remotely show you lots of places. So Andrew said, well, where would be another good field trip? And personally, and this would fall right in line with your new role, the reservoir. So I'm suggesting we meet in Madbury for our next meeting. So we'll have to schedule that. We don't have to worry about other room conflicts in Madbury because it's our room. But we do have a conference room and a way to present, and we can do everything there that we do here. Though it is, 15 minutes away, we can give you directions, but we thought we'd meet at Madbury. And maybe we meet at 6 instead of 6:30, just for light's sake, though it'll be September. So it'll still be light. And then we all go out to the reservoir so we can get in a couple vehicles and carpool. The reservoir is 5-minute drive from our water treatment facility. So we can go to the reservoir, take a look at the dam and the water itself, and then we'll go back to Madbury. And virtually, Al Pratt's son has done a drone upstream visit of the reservoir. So we can talk, and Mason will be there. We'll have Mariah, our other water quality specialist there, and Al. And I'd like to focus on source water protection, which I think might be helpful. And the efforts that, especially Al, and I know he's gotten credit from the council and we've gotten a lot of support. We can talk about the land preservation that we've done and what we hope to continue to do. But really our focus at the reservoir, and we can talk about this, and it's more than just a tour, it would be to look upstream. What can the city do? The water doesn't come from Portsmouth up there. It's in Madbury when it gets in the reservoir, but the watershed really encompasses some of Dover, a lot of Barrington, a little bit of Nottingham, a little bit of Madbury, and a little bit of Durham. So kind of that's the thought.
Does that sound okay, everyone?
Yeah.
Do you know what date it is?
No, not
We
yet.
haven't picked, do you have some
I know I can't,
conflict?
I would love to be there and I know I can't the 18th of September.
Oh,
Just sorry.
Okay.
Or wait, the 19th, whatever that Thursday is.
Like Thursdays are hard for me in September and October.
Thursdays are hard.
Thursdays?
Yeah.
Thursdays
Now,
are-
you originally said Thursdays were good.
They're good, except for September and October. I coach professional football, we play every Thursday.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
That's the same day that's bad for me, so there you go.
So would it be easier for us to try to schedule this sooner than later for people? Or is it better to schedule like in August and see where your
If
schedule's at?
people
I
have
know
the
it's so
schedules
hard.
now, I mean, and then, meetings come in, which is the thing, like a Wednesday. The Wednesday after Labor Day.
Yeah, I know it's hard. But I do think the field trips are super helpful and important and have helped reinforce all the things that we talked about. So thank you for offering that.
So the Wednesday after is September 4th.
Oh, that's September 11th. September 4th, yeah, September 4th would be the Wednesday after Labor Day. If council has a meeting, they would be on that Tuesday, so.
Yeah, we have a council meeting that Tuesday.
Works for Mason? Yeah. Yes, okay, we're
The
gonna
other
tentative,
city meetings that night are the HDC and
Yeah.
the Energy Advisory
are you HTC?
Yeah.
Okay. How about the 11th,
It'll be HCC again if it's.
something continuing?
Committee. Yeah, but
Yeah, go for that, I guess it's.
trim it down.
We might be carrying out maintenance.
Most months we have 2 BGC meetings, but it all depends on the number of applications.
Thursday doesn't work for you. Tuesday would probably be conflicting.
Tuesday, they have a council meeting, right?
The
The
tenth,
following Tuesday,
The
maybe?
10th,
the tenth has nothing in the.
Tuesday the 10th.
Okay,
We got some thumbs up, we got some yeses,
okay.
yes, yes.
Let's do it.
All right, September 10th,
Works.
okay. Good.
Okay, great. So I think just last on our agenda, any final questions for anybody or any of the, I know we've talked about a lot tonight, so any questions? And then Brian, do we have anybody online for public comment?
No, myself and Stephanie, unless she has a question.
Do we need term limits at all? I mean, do any of the residents express interest in being members or
I think,
if they do, I guess they could just join?
well, this came up when we got renewed.
Yeah.
And we did ask, are people still interested, so
Yeah,
I don't-
but I couldn't remember if if we solicit other folks or we have matters, so.
I think we have a full membership at the moment. I mean, find that before it gets because it's every 2 years, so
Yeah,
it has to
yeah.
be up, so before it's re-upped.
I haven't heard from other members interested in joining for the community. I don't know if others have, but welcome participation for sure.
Yeah, I haven't heard much either.
Buddy?
All right,
Motion to
I
adjourn.
think that concludes our meeting. I know, we're only 5 minutes over. Thank you for bearing with us and getting through 11 items. Have a great summer.